Hi, this is Dr. Sacha McBain, clinical psychologist and associate director of the Center for Trauma Prevention, Recovery, and Innovation at the University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences in Little Rock, Arkansas. This is our second video of our series, CPR for PTSD, How to Calm and Prevent Realarm for Post-Traumatic Stress Disorders. You can check the link in the description box for video 1, where we reviewed what trauma and trauma-related disorders are. In this video, we're going to be talking about emotions and triggers related to traumatic stress. As always, I'll be linking additional resources in the description box with further reading of some of the topics that I'll be talking about today. Let's start by talking about why emotions are important. Your emotions can help you live the life that you want, and they can also hold you back. After a trauma, you may have a hard time knowing what your emotions are telling you. Today's lesson is designed to teach you about your emotions and how they're connected to trauma, and how you can start thinking about it and maybe changing some of those connections that you're experiencing between how you're thinking about the trauma and how you're feeling. Emotions can help you in many ways. I think of three main purposes of emotions. The first is that emotions can help you communicate with others. Emotional connection lets you have empathy for others, and when you have empathy, you can understand and share feelings. This helps you form relationships. Emotions can also change your facial expressions, body language, and tone of voice. This affects the way that other people feel about you. Emotions also help you guide your decisions and actions. Even negative emotions can help you with this. When you feel fear, for example, it is a sign that you may be in danger, and this can help you to protect yourself. The third purpose of emotions that I think about is emotions help you know what you like and dislike and what you need. Emotions tell you what you value in life and how you want to be treated. After experiencing trauma, it can be hard for your emotions to help you. After a trauma, you may find that you're closed off from your emotions. This can make it hard to feel close to other people who may be able to provide you with support. You may find that after trauma you feel numb and may not be able to identify emotions. Sometimes there are so many negative emotions, it is hard to know when to trust or act on an emotion. This can keep you from taking action when you might need to. After trauma, you might also find that you become disconnected and start to forget what is really important to you. For example, you may make decisions based on what other people think you should do, or you may react to pressures in your life rather than what you truly want to do in order to feel safe or feel less threatened. Oftentimes when we experience difficult emotions, we want to ignore them. But knowing what your emotions are telling you helps you to change your response when you feel them and get what you need in that moment. By understanding what emotions are, what they're telling you, and maybe what you need, you can make choices about how to adaptively or respond to that emotion in a helpful way rather than just avoiding it or pushing it away, which can cause more problems down the road. I'm going to go over a couple of core emotions that are really common after experiencing trauma and talk about what each emotion is trying to tell you and what you need in that moment. The first emotion I want to talk about is fear and anxiety. What that's telling us is to run away, to avoid. But what we need in that moment then is a sense of safety. Oftentimes when I say that avoid word, people are like, oh, well, the avoiding is what I need to do. But that's not actually true in every situation. There's ways to feel safe in the moment and still experience that fear or still overcome that barrier. So we talked about in video 1 that oftentimes our danger cues can be paired with things that aren't actually dangerous to us, that aren't related to the trauma. And so we can find a sense of safety in the moment while we're figuring out if the thing is really dangerous or if it's just something that's been paired with the trauma that isn't actually threatening to you in this moment. So we'll talk about that more later. The second emotion I want to talk about is anger. Anger is trying to tell us, stop, get out of my way. Anger is emotion that comes when we feel like somebody is getting in our space, is threatening us in some way. And so what we need then, what that emotion is telling us that we need is protection or to set boundaries, to express to the person that is making you angry what you need in that moment. The next emotion is sadness. Sadness is telling us that it's time to withdraw, to rest, or to take stock of a situation. And then what we need in response to sadness is a sense of healing or some downtime or care or connection with somebody else. Another emotion I often hear after trauma is disgust. Disgust is telling us, stay away, that's toxic. And so what we need in that moment is similar to what we need with fear and anxiety, a sense of safety, a sense of protection from the thing that we think is going to hurt us. And so we'll talk in video 3 about ways to gain that sense of safety without avoiding. The next emotion is that sense of feeling overwhelmed. What this is trying to tell you is this is too much. And so what you need in that moment is to slow down or take a break. Oftentimes people think, well, if I just grit through it, if I just keep going, then I'll get through it eventually. But that very rarely happens. We need to take time, we need to take action to slow down and take a break when we're feeling overwhelmed, or else we're just going to continue feeling overwhelmed. The last emotion that I want to talk about is shame. Shame is telling us to hide or cover up, and it's telling us that we need social approval. And so oftentimes after trauma, people feel shame. And one way to get that social approval is to talk with people that you trust and care about, to get that sense of connection and that comfort that you might be needing. Another thing with shame too is that if you're in a situation where you've hurt someone or have put someone in danger or something else that might be causing a sense of shame, you can access that social approval, but another way to manage shame is to act in a way to repair the damage, to repair the hurt in the ways that you can. And if that's not available to you, repairing that within yourself and coming back to that social approval. In video 1, I mentioned something called a trigger. A trigger is a reminder of the trauma. It's a piece of the traumatic event that comes into the present and reminds us of what happened. Triggers can be really unpleasant and frightening, and they can lead to emotional reactions. And so I want to talk about how triggers are related to the emotional experience. So triggers can lead to emotional reactions that can change your mind and your body very quickly. They can lead to anger, fear, panic, confusion, numbness, or even feeling disconnected from yourself or what is around you. I've been talking about how we can use our emotions in a helpful way and described what each emotion is trying to tell us and what we need to do to address that emotion. But in order for your emotions to help you, you want to be what's called the window of tolerance. In this state, you can handle your emotions. You can think clearly, you can be active and alert, and you can feel centered and deal with the emotions and new information as it comes up. When you're triggered, you can leave the window of tolerance and go into one of two states. The first state is hyperarousal. In this state, you might have a flood of emotions, really strong emotions, images in your mind that you can't control, many thoughts and a hard time organizing those thoughts, and you may just feel out of control in general. The opposite of hyperarousal is hypoarousal. In this state, you might feel very little emotion at all, or you might feel completely numb. You might have trouble moving from one thought to the next, and you might find that you just have less energy. It's hard to do the things that you need to do. Living in hyperarousal or hypoarousal can be really uncomfortable. It can be almost like you're living in survival mode. And so what we want to do is to help get you to be living in that window of tolerance, that middle zone, as much as we can. And one way to do that is to manage triggers. The first step to managing triggers is to be aware of what your triggers are. Once you know what they are, you can make a plan about how to manage them. It's important to note that there will likely be triggers that will come up that you can't predict or know about until they happen. But there likely are triggers that you do know, and you can start to think about how you might respond to them. And so this is just a beginning guide to get started on how to target triggers that you're aware of now or that you worry might come up in the future. Triggers can come in lots of different forms and can include things like what you see, what you hear, smell, touch, or taste. Triggers can even be certain places, people, certain types of weather, seasons, or the time of day, for example, nighttime. It's okay if you don't know what your triggers are right now in this moment as you're watching this. Over time, you can start to notice your triggers and start to keep track of what they are. Identifying triggers and knowing how to cope with them is a part of therapy for trauma-related disorders. And so before moving on to our third video, take some time to identify and write down some of your biggest triggers. Knowing what your triggers are that cause you the most distress will help you in choosing coping strategies to meet what you need right now. And that will help you get the most use out of video 3, where we're going to be talking a lot about coping strategies. Before watching video 3, it can also be helpful to write down how you've coped in the past and how you cope now. Journaling can be a really helpful way to understand your thoughts, feelings, and your triggers. And some questions that you can ask yourself are, how did my response in the past compare to how I'm responding to triggers now? Is it the same? Is it better? Is it getting worse? You can also think about how likely it is that you'll interact with or experience that trigger again. So if your trigger is someone within your family, it's likely that you're going to need a coping skill to help manage that. But if it was a one-off thing, you went on a trip and you saw this thing that reminded you, and it's unlikely that you're going to come across that trigger again, that might be lower on your priority list. Okay, that's all the information we're going to be talking about for video 2. We covered emotions, how they're related to trauma, how they can be helpful, and how trauma interferes with our emotional experience. And then we started talking about triggers, what they are, how to identify them. And so in video 3, hopefully you'll have a list of your most common triggers, the ones that make you the most upset. And when we go through video 3, you can start to connect the different coping skills that we'll be talking about to some of the triggers that you're experiencing. Until next time.